But what I would like to do in setting the scene for today's meeting or for today's discussion is to frame what we're going to be talking about. I think this is an extremely important topic and one that needs perhaps a lot more discussion and even more action. You know, while countries in other developing regions, particularly Asia, and I travel to Asia quite regularly to their World Economic Forums, and I see what they're doing. They were pivoting to manufacturing in the 1970s and the 1980s, driven by a focus on exports, where Africa, on the other hand, continued to rely on the export of raw materials. But this trend has changed. Starting in the early 90s, over 20 countries in Africa have enacted legislation and strategies to establish zones. According to the UNCTAD report, the special economic zones are currently operating 38 out of 54 of the economies on the continent. In 2019, the World Investment Report of UNCTAD noted that despite the global slump, FDI to Africa increased by 11%, with a significant growth in non-source seeking investment driven in part by the increase in zone operations in countries such as Ethiopia, Morocco, and Kenya. However, the UNCTAD reports that the COVID-19 has caused FDI in Africa to plunge 16% in 2020. And now we see where the problems start. And projects growth of only 5% in 2021. In the ILO, we documented how COVID-19 has exposed structural inequalities in the labor market and the inadequacy of social protection systems in many countries, particularly in developing countries. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals of 2030, our global plan, are more relevant than ever, especially for us, the SDG 8 on inclusive economic growth and decent work. The zones have an important role to play in building back better with a human-centered approach, particularly concerning the creation of decent work that lifts workers and their families out of poverty and stimulates further enterprise and job creation. In 2017, at the ILO, we had a tripartite experts meeting on the promotion of decent work in SEZs. And the conclusions noted many benefits of zones for decent work. And this included things like export that adds value to a country. Many low-income countries with scarce resources for productive investment look to zones to attract badly needed FDI. Although zones account for a relatively small share of investment in large economies, in developing countries, they are often a very substantial contributor. And that is certainly a focus point that we need to look at going forward. Zones are often discrete regions or specific sectors which provide a more manageable first step for governments to introduce the administrative, legislative, and market reforms needed to progressively open their economies and globalization. Zones also generate much needed jobs and provide channels for skills and technology spillovers. I think one of the biggest challenges in Africa is we don't have a skills platform that matches the market needs, and we're going to have to address that. Despite many government resources that go into creating and supporting zones and attracting investors, relatively few countries succeed in generating quality jobs and spillovers to help local producers and stimulating broad industrial development. Furthermore, resource zones for zone development, including policies for attracting investors, could be better designed and harnessed for achieving the SDGs. The conclusions of the ILO debate called the office to provide technical assistance to member states on policies that enable zones and their contribution to decent work, capacity building, skills development, and effective labor inspection. And then they asked us to support national employers and workers' organizations, and some of you will be speaking from that platform today. And then intensify collaboration and coordination with other international organizations, such as UNCTAD, which we're doing today, WIPO, and the WTO. As a follow-up at these conclusions, a joint ILO-UNCTAD report published in 2020 undertook a review of publicly available information on 100 of the top government-managed zones. And some of the findings from that indicate that although 40% of the zones reviewed considered local employment creation to be a main objective, relatively few considered labor policy and the observance of this policy as an important part of their investment and the promotion strategy. 1/3 of the zones reviewed referred to at least some aspects of labor rights as part of the advantages of doing business in their zones. But the large majority of zones focused almost exclusively on promoting infrastructure and tax incentives. And that's where we need to work on. And then my last point is the SEZs are uniquely positioned to promote decent work in African countries. Zones that champion decent work can draw in investors that want to attract and retain a productive workforce. A systematic zone-led approach generates economies of scale and avoids wasteful duplication in ensuring respect for workers' rights, helping operators to meet the growing buyer expectations of good labor practices in their global supply chains as efficiently as possible. I'm now going to go on and thank you for listening to my opening remarks, and hopefully that has set the scene for me now to move across to and introduce our panelists. The ILO is very pleased to partner with UNCTAD for this very important discussion on good practices, the remaining challenges, and what sorts of support can we give to help African countries in advancing decent work in the SEZs. We are privileged to have a distinguished panel of speakers today who will share their knowledge and experience with us as we contemplate on how to promote more and better jobs in zones. Our first speaker is going to be Ms. Emilia Santos Paulino, the Chief of the UNCTAD Investment Issues Section. She'll be followed by Mr. Lise Neme, the Commissioner of the Ethiopian Investment Commission, and then by Ms. Kate Abeo, the Deputy CEO of the Ghana Free Zone Authority, and followed by Stephen Obiro, Head of the Advocacy, Communications and Partnerships Federation of Kenyan Employers, and lastly by Ms. Caroline Kamati Mugala, the Executive Secretary of East African Trade Union Confederation. So I would like to invite our first speaker, Emilia. Welcome, and it's great to have you also speaking from Geneva, where it's a bit chilly and cloudy today. The floor is yours.
Many thanks, Vic, and thank you so much for the cooperation. Thank you to you and to Emily Sims to join forces with us to organize this important event. I'm glad that we have distinguished panelists that are on the ground that represent the different sectors important for this discussion. If you allow me to, I will show you some findings, very brief presentation. I will share my screen because yesterday we launched a research report, but it's more than research, it's a policy making a handbook that presents important findings in terms of development of SEZ and enhancement of the role of SEZ in Africa, and how special economic zones can contribute to economic diversification and to social and development goals. You made my life very, very easy, I have to say, because you gave outstanding remarks. I will share my screen and I will focus on some of the key findings related to employment. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we've got your screen. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So as I said yesterday, we launched a report focusing on economic diversification and economic integration in Africa. But before that, and also we had important contributions from ILO. In 2019, UNCTAD introduced the concept of Sustainable Development Goals zones, whereby we look at different aspects of environmental, social, and economic governance. So here today, one of the issues that we think there is more to do, more work to do, is on the front of decent work and employment. As you might have seen, we have at the WIF a full track devoted to special economic zones from various angles, covering issues from the role of special economic zones to foster links with cities, and here employment is a key issue. Also looking at the role of innovation, and this one on employment. And we will end up the week with the launching of a special initiative that will be coordinated by UNCTAD, and is the Global Alliance of Special Economic Zones, with partnership with special economic zones associations and national governments, as a way of fostering learning and collaboration in important issues in order to enhance the role of SEZ. So I will invite you all to follow that. So just to move quickly, I mean, we know, as Vic said in his opening remark, that special economic zones can make important contributions to economic growth and development. They can help to attract investment, and in fact, in many countries with limited institutional capacity and a very limited domestic productive sector, they are the key tool for attracting investment. They can help to create jobs and to boost exports, both direct and indirectly, and with plenty of scope to build proper linkages with the national economies. And they also can support the integration within global value chains. And here we don't talk about only the big sons, but also the firms that they tend to subcontract. And this is another issue also related to employment. Here we have the possibility of creating direct employment and indirect employment, depending the linkages with the local economy. But as
sorry, Amelia,
yes,
are you moving slides? Because I'm not seeing slides moving on.
No, I'm going to move now. I'm just giving
okay,
a brief,
sorry, I just wanted to make sure that
brief introduction. Perfect.
Okay.
So basically, a key issue that SECs have been criticized for is for not adhering to adequate social and environmental standards. Here, if we start with the first generation of sons, they have pursued investment attraction strategy just centered around low wages and questionable employment conditions. So here, before I go into these issues, I just want to make the point that in Africa, the impact is important. I mean, here we see the number of sons have proliferated and have increased starting from a very low base in 1990s to over 200, around 240 sons in the continent. And here we have countries that have a very low employment pool to countries with very large employment pool like Ethiopia. So I'm glad that we have today panelists from those countries. So countries like Kenya. So, but one of the key issues here that we discussed in the handbook, and also we discussed in the World Investment Report, and also in a recent survey that we did with the Association of Economic Zones in Africa, with AESO, was to see how, as I said at the beginning, zones can contribute to enhancing social and economic and environmental standards, and this the well-known social governance and standards. And also, it's not only for the sake of promoting this, but also to complement the attractiveness of zones, to try to attract, to pull what we call enhanced investment for purpose. So what we found with the discussions with zones managers and in our surveys and in our research is that a focus on labor standards and environmentally friendly, gender inclusive programs can not only boost the contributions of SECs to the society, but also they can help to increase the efficiency within the zones and also the profile of zones amongst investors and among trading partners. Then economic social governance standards can promote substantive positive externalities in terms of the productivity of the zones. We see that there are clear incentives to try to leverage investment that is not only looking for low wage comparative advantage, but to zones that are promoting SDG focus standards. And also we found that zones that have this drive, this SDG oriented goals, they have they have enhanced worker productivity, and they have lower staff turnover because they invest in some issues like we have here, like gender, housing, and other amenities. And there are some zones like that have in place labor solution and labor conflict solution standards. So basically, we see that environmental focus is driving this SDG-oriented type of operations, and some, as I said, have introduced labor inspection, conflict resolution, and housing. But this is only provided by about 1/3 of the zones that we have evaluated in Africa. So there is a long way to go. Around 1/3 of the zones provide this type of decent work and labor-related policies. Takeaway, yes, social performance is becoming a key feature of special economic zones, but in the continent is not the norm. It's still very low, and in terms of the focus. Still, environmental comes on top, which is important, of course, but there are many issues related to employment and decent work that have to be taken into consideration. Moving on. Other issues that we look at was the issue of the gender composition and the issue of gender balance. So we know that around the world, special economic zones are traditionally big employers of women, with about 60% of, on average, across zones in the world are women. So the female, the gender, the implications for gender policies are important. As we saw, there are issues related, for example, to childcare, to social protection, maternity leave, paternity leave, and security, training, and skills that are important, especially when looking at gender balance issues. We found that gender inclusive policies have been incorporated in a few special economic zones across Africa. In general, we see in the continent, like, for example, the same in Latin America and other regions, that zones typically employ a higher share of women than the national average, even where national levels of female participations are relatively low. So again, the gender issues matter. We did a survey for the gender. I mean, we have some some responded that around 35% of the labor force at zones in these countries were female. For example, special economic zones in Togo, Nigeria, and South Africa display the highest rates of female participation. But we also found that women in Africa and in the sector endure considerable number of challenges, including lack of health awareness, low educational levels in compared to the male counterparts, and that have an effect on the performance of women in the workplace. Also, some zones have been criticized, and in our study we showed that for the treatment of women, basically, if we look at labor standards and working conditions. Common concerns in this area include the suppression of core labor rights, for example, collective bargaining, poor employment conditions like long working hours, health and safety standards. Also lack of training or skill upgrading, and use of trainees, especially, and this was very, very important on the gender focus, the use of trainees to depress wage cost and exploitation of women. So here, in terms of exploitation, again, we saw lower wages, lack of childcare, inadequate rights during pregnancy. So these were the main issues of concern. And so finally, yes, there are lights and shadows. There are lights and shadows here. We found that modern zones in the continent, although they are not the majority, are implementing gender equality regulations, as I showed in my previous slides, such as anti-discrimination rules and support services. And also some are introducing childcare and schooling facilities, setting new standards for SDG-related performance. As I said, and I'm almost wrapping up, although at the moment it is difficult to find a fully SDG compliant, as I said, in the African context, the initial steps pursued within several examples are promising, as I said. Specific provisions that we found in the workplace, such the ones that I mentioned, can help really to improve the performance. And also, I mean, here is the whole debate about inclusive policies and how to reduce the marginalization of women through health and through outcomes that improve the productivity of in special economic zones. I will not go into detail into all the issues that we cover related to employment. These are the core takeaways. So we look forward to continue working with partners to try to find solutions and how to increase this development of policies with investment promotion agencies, with zones developers, and so on. We have a set of events, a technical assistance events plan, and I hope to work with ILO on the social and labor inclusive policies front. I will stop here and thank you very much, and I look forward to the panel discussions.
Thank you very much for that great presentation. You know, the one slide you showed there with the environment on the top on the one end and gender on the bottom on the other one, I think we've certainly got a lot of work to do on the gender field, not only in Africa, but across the globe. Thank you very much. We now move on to our next presenter, who is Ms. Lelise Neme from Ethiopia, who is the Commissioner of the Ethiopian Investment Commission. Great to have you with us today, and we'd like to hear of your experiences as Commissioner, how the objective of decent work has been factored into the Ethiopian government's policies that shape the impressive development and growth of zones. And we've seen a lot happening in the last year or so. So, Lelise, thank you. The floor is yours. You're not unmuted yet. We can't hear you.
I'm sorry.
There we go. Now we can hear you.
So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to speak on this decent work and special economic zone that's organized by. You are not hearing me? Oh, okay. Now can you see me? Okay, so thank you again for arranging this session, this special session on the decent work and special economic zone. That's really, really matter for Ethiopia, especially for Africa as well. So my name is Lelise. I'm the Ethiopian Investment Commission Commissioner, who's responsible on the foreign direct investment. So I'm very delighted to share the experience that we had as in Ethiopia, especially on special economic zone that we call it the industrial park development zones. That's majorly focused on the manufacturing sector. That's really have a lot of jobs, that creates a lot of jobs. More than 80,000 of employees has been hired there, and there are more than 100,000 indirect jobs that has been created. So at the objective of the Ethiopian policy, especially especially on the decent work on the employee side, we have a policy that's really direct all the investors in all government sectors to follow up how our employees, especially most of in the industrial parks, employees are women. That needs great attention, especially their youth. So there are different parties that needs a critical support from the government side. So most of our industrial parks are in the city, and most of the employees are coming from with 100-kilometer radius, that they need a lot of support from the government side, from the investor side. So majorly on shaping up those policies regarding the housing, providing housing for those employees was a critical path that we did on the last few years. Now we have some experience on some of our industrial park. All the investor has taken the initiative to build a house for the employees, especially who's coming from the far. So that's really helped us to majorly to solve the labor issues that request the demand of us. So that's the one major milestone that we did. The other experience is, on the labor issue, as we are based in the agrarian environment, the industries have different lessons that we did. So we try to link with the universities, with the technical university that really help the employee to have more particular experience on that side. So that programs really help us to make sure the productivity can be increased as soon as possible. So that's really help us from our side. So this program will definitely help any country to implement, to have a decent work in this special economic zone. So I believe that having a policy that really focus on the labor, that really focus on the decent work, will give the maximum support for the investor side, even for the employee side as well. As it mentioned that most of the investors request regarding the decent work request many issues, because as we are in developing countries, there are a lot of back and forth issues that factor the investment from the export or from the import substitution. So the major input is a labor. The major input is having a decent employee at that industrial parks. So having those ecosystem in one place really help us. The other experience that we did is, as I mentioned, most of the employees coming from the rural areas, engaging the regional government authority that's responsible on recruiting those employees was one of the challenges we face. But now we have a mandated steering committee who's following up this all the time during on the request of the investors, request of on our parks, they demand as per the request. So linkaging with the regional government authorities, because we are at the federal level, the parks are the region areas. So having those linkage, having those steering committee really help us as an investment commission to sustain the investment. So maybe the other thing is working with the development partners, because sometimes the effort of the government side is very less. We might not meet the private sector demand as per their request. So we're trying to link with different development partners that link with the labor issues, especially with the bridging the gaps from the government and the private sector. So we try to use those development partners to encourage our system with the decent work activities, employments, and increasing the training capacity to those employees by linking and capacitating the government authority and the universities and technical vocational schools as well. So this definitely help us. And I believe as an investment commission in Ethiopia, having those authority, having changing all the rules and mandates of as a delegate, as a one-stop service will help us. That's the other lesson, because in all special economic zone or in our industrial parks, we have a one-stop service who is the investment commission has been delegated to work all activity related to the labor, related to other government institutes as well. So because of our focuses today in decent work, I'm only focused on the labor authorities. So this labor authorities has been delegated to the investment commission. So getting those delegation and implementing as per the regulation that requires is a critical, and that really give us a good relief for our investor side as well. So I believe working and focusing in decent work will definitely be a good potential and opportunity for our investors to implement their investment and to get those productivity and to get those all job creation, indirect or direct job creation will matter on this work and how we implement on that side. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've said a lot there in what is happening, and it's exciting to see what's happening in Ethiopia. You know, the many jobs created, the support programs, you touch on productivity. These are all such key elements of what makes a good zone operate. So thank you very much. We're now going to move on to our next speaker, who is Ms. Kate Abeo, the Deputy CEO of the Ghana Free Zones Authority. Let's see how Ghana is doing in the free zones area. Kate, nice to have you on board, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I'm very happy to be part of this engagement. We want to share the Ghanaian experience. I have some slides. If, with your permission, I could share with
you can share your screen. We can see, but we can't see the slides, but we can see your screen.
Ghana has used several approaches in ensuring that companies who have been employed to work within the free zone space work with a high level of decency. We have, through regulation, through dialogue with relevant stakeholders, and through constant facilitatory work, ensured the provision of decent jobs within our zones. First and foremost, through regulation, we have ensured that the laws and policies are in sync with ILO conventions. The beauty about how we have gone about the Ghanaian experience is that all labor laws are applicable to employment contracts within the free zones. So by virtue of this application, workers' rights on freedom of association, ability to negotiate terms of contracts, respect for women's rights and rights of the disabled are all guaranteed. There are also specific provisions in the Free Zones Act to ensure that workers' rights are upheld. For instance, regulations on pensions within the domestic space are applicable to free zone employees. Everything we do is tailored to ensure that both the employer and the employee work in the space of mutual respect and ensure that productivity is enhanced. The free zones regulation, particularly regulation 34, is very unique in that there's the requirement for the firms to utilize at least 1% of the annual turnover in training local employees. And by this, we ensure that there is consistent skills enhancement and skills development. There is also the requirement for the employees to biannually present a report on these training requirements. And we have a very robust compliance department which goes through these reports to ensure that indeed those requirements are met. And with dialogue, right from the startup stage, we engage the prospective investors. We educate them with the assistance of the required stakeholders, the Labor Commission, the Work and Officers Inspectorate Division of the Ministry of Interior. We bring all these stakeholders on board in this form of education. And it does not just end there. We also operate a one-shop system. The Free Zones Act mandates the authority to help employers and firms in procurement of all permits and licenses. So we always serve as the bridge between the firms and other government agencies. So whenever there are labor-related, industrial-related issues, we serve as the intermediary between the firms and the government agencies. And this partnership has also worked very well considerably. We have been able to minimize the incidence of abuses within the labor front. We are very quick to respond to complaints from employees, and we have made all attempts to harmonize the labor front. And I must also add that we have very good engagement and rapport with stakeholders, partners, and international organizations. One of our sponsors, for instance, is helping us to enhance the working conditions within the Tema export processing zone. We have put forward a proposal to ensure that there's reasonable accessibility to transportation. We are enhancing the mobility within the zone by getting our partner to help us procure electric buses, so the workers wouldn't have to trek on foot from our gate to their various factories. Apart from that, we had a canteen structure which had not been put into use. We are seeking to revitalize this facility so we could serve decent meals to workers, particularly those at the bottom of the pyramid, at reasonable price. We are also in collaboration with this partner to train the unskilled workers. We want to enhance their ICT skills. You know that the world has gone digital, so it is important that those who ordinarily are not in the position to afford such training are assisted to upgrade their skills. And this development partner is helping us to train the unskilled workers. Apart from all of these, we also go through the returns of the companies, and we are able to identify instances when the workers are underpaid. Our regulations stipulate that no free zone employee should be paid below the minimum wage. So we have mechanisms in place to identify that workers' rights are not abused, and whenever we identify any such occurrence, our response time is very quick. We intervene to ensure that the right thing is done. And because of the rapport we have with not just the employer and the employee, but other relevant stakeholders. I've previously mentioned the Labor Commission. We have, to a large extent, with this collaboration, educated all the parties involved. So the workers themselves know their rights. They know that they have freedom of association. They know the Free Zones Act permits them to have in-house collective bargaining agreements, but that also does not stop them from joining other national trade unions of their choice. So they know very well. And we have done our best not to supervise sweatshops. Even in this era of COVID, we have been quick to ensure that the health and safety protocols of the workers and the employees are safeguarded. We consistently bring in experts who advise and teach them how to minimize the occurrence of the virus within the various factory floors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've really showed the importance of the regulatory framework that is necessary to keep these standards in place. And you touched on process, the whole dialogue component and collective bargaining and skills. So thank you for sharing the Ghana experience. We're now going to move across to Kenya and to the employer side, Mr. Stephen Obiro, head of the Advocacy, Communications and Partnerships Federation of Kenya Employers. Can you tell us how the Kenyan employers are supporting the promotion of decent working zones in your country? So thank you for being with us, Stephen. I hope you're there, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and I'll share a little bit on the Kenyan employers and how we are promoting the decent work in the EPZ. The first thing we do as the employer organization is to have programs that build the capacity of the employers in this sector. This is very important because the realization we have in Africa and in most of the employers is that and they need to be aware of what is expected of them, to be aware of the best practices that are outside there, the standards that are there that they need to adhere to. And so we have programs that are targeted to them, to these employers. And by so doing, we see most of them improving and adhering to a lot of standards that are there. The second thing we've done is we've introduced awards. And an example is one is the Employee of the Year Awards that recognizes and the best practices that are in those sectors, the good things that they are doing. And so we look at them, we evaluate them on different categories, and we are able to recognize those that are promoting best practices in their work environment. We have some of the things that are looked for in this award is how they are adhering to the various regulations that are there. How are they looking at the issues of work environment, the gender issues, inclusion issues, and all that. And this is really good because it encourages them. So instead of us looking at the perhaps a few who are doing the bad things, we are looking at those ones who are doing good things in their sectors, in their workplaces, and then we promote them. We let even others know about it. We are also a very key player in the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights. And we evaluate and assess and see what are the gaps that are there. And we work together with employers and different stakeholders, including Global Compact, in ensuring that we promote the decent work. And part of the thing that we have also observed is on the skills area, because we realize that there is a lot of skills need, so that then the employees can be able to command higher pay. And we've had partnerships with the National Industrial Training Authority, the Kenya National Qualification Framework, the Association of Tech-Activity Institutions. And in those, through those partnerships, part of the things we have done even is recognition of prior learning, promotion of lifelong learning, and ensuring that the workers' capacity continuously is built for them to not only know their rights, but also to improve their productivity and therefore improve their pay. We have also been a key actor on the wage councils. The wage council sets the minimum salaries for different sectors, and part of the sector that is looked at is the EPZ, and through that we are able to negotiate and see the appropriate wage that can be support the welfare of the worker and also ensure that the functioning of the enterprise continues well. And then the other thing that we've done is the negotiation of CBS for them, for the enterprises that are in this sector. And through that, we have been able to adopt through the CBS a number of decent work practices and introduce them to the factories. And we have also promoted through the boards we sit in, like the National Social Security Fund, the National Health Insurance Fund, to ensure that even the workers in these sectors in the EPZ are also covered by the NSSF and also by the NHIF. And so we have tried to ensure that there is accommodation in the instruments that are for these funds. And through our advocacy initiatives and engagement with the tripartite partners, one example is what we did when at the onset of COVID. COVID was, we were not prepared for it as a country, just like the rest of the world. And when it came in, it came with different challenges. And so what we did, we were able to rally and bring together our social partners, our trade unions, the Central Organization of Trade Union, and engage with the government, and came together and developed a memorandum of understanding on how the employers and employees are going to negotiate around the various issues that they are going to face in the because of the impact of COVID. And because of this, we were able even to reduce the job losses in these sectors and even the income losses. Through that engagement, we are also able to convince the government to put into place measures that cushion the workers from adverse effect of COVID. And the other important thing we've done, we've promoted the sexual reproductive health rights at the workplace and targeting the EPZ also, seeing that the different challenges that different genders face at workplace. And so through these programs, we've been able to support a lot the WIF female workers, who are a big number, especially when you look at the sector that includes the textile and all that in Kenya. And lastly, we have been a proponent of Buy Kenya, Build Kenya, or Buy Africa, Build Africa. And through this, we support the companies so that then they can have a steady flow of income and access to market for them to be able to afford to pay high salaries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've certainly been busy as the Employers Federation. Listening to the comments, your building of capacity and what you're providing is so important as one of the social partners in this whole arena of SEZs. And also, I like the concept of the awards and the incentives. I think we often forget that people, like to be incentivized, and the importance it has in generating the right direction. So thank you very much for your remarks. We're moving now from Kenya, and we're going to go across to Arusha and to hear from the workers. And we're going to ask Ms. Caroline Kamati Mugala, the Executive Secretary of the East African Trade Union Confederation, to tell us how the workers are experiencing the SEZs. Thank you, Caroline. You are our last speaker today, so the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Vic. Being a last speaker is quite interesting. You might not have something to say because whatever you wanted to say has already been said, and it's like Stephen was peeping into my mind in terms of what I'm going to talk about, and that just shows the kind of social dialogue strength we have in East Africa in terms of the employers and the trade unions working together. But if I just look at what are the main challenges workers are facing in the special economic zones, because I'm not only speaking for East Africa, but also looking at workers in general across Africa. I think the main issue has always been around freedom. Most of the countries in East Africa allows, the laws allows for freedom of association, but the implementation or the ability to be able to implement it has been a challenge. And this is also, we should also realize that this, for countries like Kenya, this is not something that was there at the beginning when the EPZs were set up. EPZs earlier in the years as they started off were exempted from the labor laws. So it was through the advocacy of the trade union, through engaging social dialogue, that EPZs were finally, the labor laws were finally able to be applied in the EPZs in Kenya and many countries across Africa. I think one case study that also brings to light the issue around freedom of association for workers in Africa has been the case of Swaziland, and we saw to an extent that Swaziland was also suspended from the AGOA, just because of issues around freedom of association. So where we lack freedom of association, then we see low wages and issues around standards, working condition of workers in the EPZ in terms of occupational health and safety. We are looking around issues of compensation, and it even makes it worse when a country lacks a statutory minimum wage. And I would like to just get from my sister in Ethiopia if they have been able to put a statutory minimum wage in place. During the pandemic, you could see the EPZ, particularly for East Africa, were highly affected by COVID because of cancellation of orders or reduction of orders. So where you lack a union, you lack freedom of association, you have no collective bargaining, you are at the mercy of the employer to do with you whatever they wanted to do with you. But you would see countries like Kenya and Uganda that has, you know, some good kind of social dialogue structures. They had tripartite agreements. I think Kenya, COTU and FKE had a memorandum of understanding on how they are going to treat workers with regards to COVID. But also another challenge has been the challenge, you know, around inspection and enforcement of the labor laws, which is even made to be more complicated when they have to deal with the labor laws and the special economic zone laws. I remember my colleague from Ghana. The issue of inspection and enforcement is also a challenge. Yes, we have the laws, but are they being enforced? And if they are not being enforced, is there a challenge in terms of inspection? And this goes to the capacity of our ministries of labor or the authorities that are supposed to carry out this function, you know, are capacitated or are facilitated to be able to carry out the function. Then it comes to the question: how does, you know, ETUC and other, you know, unions work to promote decent work in these zones? I think I've already mentioned it. Where we have, when you lack freedom of association, then what do we do for trade union? The main issue remains organizing and having collective bargaining that are able to protect, you know, workers, bearing in mind that a majority of the people working in this special economic zones are actually women, and not just any age group, young women. So if you don't have, you know, watertight collective bargaining agreement that looks at the plight of the majority of the workforce that is represented in the special economic zone, then it becomes a gap on our part. So the other, what we've also been doing, we have programs that we call study circles. These are shop floor capacity building trainings of our members at the shop floor level that we carry out in the region and over and beyond the region. We have, you know, issues like workplace occupational health and safety and health committees in place to look at issues of occupational health. And this occupational health and safety committees, currently there's a lot of discussions around, you know, occupational health and safety with regard to COVID. As we know, the kind of, you know, working condition that the people in the economic, the special economic zone working. Take a good example. If you go to a textile factory, you can see the working spaces, issues around social distancing, issues around sanitizing. It's also a challenge. So these are some of the discussions that are going on in the occupational health and safety committees. But also another important part that we are trying to build our capacity in is the capacity around effective engagement of trade unions in trade, you know, issues around trade agreement and trade development. Because this is where the agreements are made. And we normally say the devil is in the details. As I just close up my remarks, I think the advice I will give to us trade unions in Africa is still one. The main advice is organize, 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 because you cannot speak if you are weak as a union and you do not organize. Our strength is in numbers, so we need to organize. And you see through this, we've seen countries that are well organized in terms of trade unions, that have strong trade unions, are the ones that some of the best practices are being drawn from. Look at Kenya, look at South Africa, look at Nigeria, look at Ghana. They have one thing in common: strong trade unions that are organizing. The strength can be, an issue of discussion, but at least there's some kind of strength. And one of the good examples, I think, that Stephen did not talk about, we saw, through social dialogue, countries like Kenya discussing what role can the textile factories that had lost orders could play during the pandemic. And we saw a lot of production of the PPEs from those textile companies that were initially, producing for export. And this, the PPEs that were being produced in the EPZs in Kenya were also in Kenya, in Nakuru, around the country, were being exported to countries like, Uganda and across the board. And lastly, I think one of the advice is we need to make trade and development core part of our work, to ensure that any trade agreements or any development policies that are being put in place ensure decent livelihood. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving us the perspective from the workers. And the important point that I picked up is the implementation is so important. It doesn't help just to have laws. If you don't have the inspection and the implementation, they don't really mean much. And you talked about the AGOA agreement in Eswatini, or Swaziland, as we knew it as. I was part and parcel of that whole AGOA setup when I was based in Pretoria, dealing with that. But anyway, we've got 3 minutes left, and what I'm going to do now is just ask our 4 speakers that are on the panel, are still online, to the 2 government representatives. I'm going to start with Elise, just in one sentence to say, what do you see as one of the big successes of the SEZs in Ethiopia? Just in one sentence, give us one highlight of what you see as a success. And I'm going to ask the same of Kate, and then I'll ask a different question to Stephen and Caroline in a moment. But just one sentence, please, because then we've got to wrap up. Lalisa, are you there?
Yes, so it might be difficult in one sentence, but having a special economic zone is the most foundation to reform the economic boundary at the part of the industrial parks that will help to sustain the decent work inside the parks.
Thank you. You could be a great politician with that statement. You hit the right on the center. Thank you for that. Over to you, Kate. What do you say from Ghana? We can't hear you. You are muted. Okay, your one sentence, please.
Thank you very much. I think industrialization is a tool to ensuring decent job opportunities in Africa. And the special economic zones and the free zones, by their structure, have the capacity to deliver on that. But it shouldn't be done in a vacuum. We should respect the rights and aspirations of the talent pool. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen, I want to ask you and Caroline, what do you see, if you could just give one challenge to having successful special export, export zones. I'm getting my language all mixed up here. What do you see as one challenge in one sentence, and the same for Caroline, that's preventing the success of these zones? Stephen, you're muted. Okay.
Oh, thank you. One of the challenge that I see is that the stakeholders need to work together, and looking at the market access. If you look at the Africa today, we have the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, how standards are passed so that then this sector, the EPZ, is able to meet the needs that are in that agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. I always advocate that processes is equally important as content, and thank you. That's an extremely valuable point. Caroline, the last one sentence before we close.
I think for us, one of the major challenges that the special economic zones bring is the issue around jobs. We are told we should appreciate the jobs that you're being given. But the challenge here is not any job is a good job if the job is not decent. So for us, the challenge has always been the decency of the jobs that are coming in with the special economic zones.
Thank you. And that brings us exactly on the dot. In Africa, they always say we don't keep our time, but thank you. You've been great. We are exactly on the hour. So Elise, Kate, Stephen, and Caroline, thank you for your availability, for your participation, and for the rich content that you've put on the table to show what's happening in Africa. It is very close to my heart, being an African, and we need to move in Africa. We need to get these zones moving. We need to move from giving raw materials to getting into these export processing zones and to making things happen for the improvement of the people in Africa. So thank you very much. I wish to thank UNCTAD and the people behind the scenes for having set this up, for Emily from the ILO. Thank you for all your support, and I wish you all a great day, and may Africa move forward. Thank you very much, and I now close the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you too.
Thank you, everyone.